Lucky enough now to be joined by Gilbert Manzano, who covers the Chargers on a regular basis as a beat writer. Thanks for being with us, Gilbert. Appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Carolyn. I'm excited for this conversation.
Let's start with the Julio Jones rumors that seem to be including the Chargers to a certain extent. I guess they've got enough cap space to warrant that kind of discussion. Do you see a trade like this possible for the team?
I don't know. I don't see it in the cards for the Chargers, but you're right. You mentioned the cap space. So when you have a young quarterback like Justin Herbert, and you have cap space, and you're in Los Angeles, I think the Chargers seem like a good fit. But in terms of wide receiver, I don't really see them being kind of a big need. But obviously, a guy like Julio Jones, you kind of want to jump on. But then you start thinking about compensation, and if you bring in that cap, that cap hit, then you don't have the cap space. So that's kind of an issue. And I know with Tom Telesco, the Chargers general manager, he likes to have the cap space and be a little flexible. But maybe if it's more on the draft picks, and I know, again, the Chargers don't like to kind of give up first-round draft picks, but it's like a second-round pick, third-round pick, why not? But I think they're set with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, they added Jared Cook, Austin Eckler. They have an abundance of weapons for Justin Herbert. But when there's a guy like Julio Jones out there, you got to at least pick up the phone and give it a try. But for right now, I don't think they're kind of front runners.
Yeah, I do wonder how Keenan Allen would potentially affect his production. And then you think about the mileage, even though, in your opinion, he's obviously a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he is creeping towards that mid-30 range. If it made sense with the draft picks and if the salary cap hit wasn't too extreme, would it make sense to bring another receiver in, a receiver of that caliber?
Yeah, again, if it's Julio Jones, it definitely always makes sense. But you mentioned Keenan Allen. He takes a lot of targets, and he got paid as well. I think he's about making about $22 million annually, so it's a big chunk of change for Keenan Allen. But you really got to consider Julio Jones, because if you kind of try to look at the Justin Herbert window of the rookie contract, the best thing you could have in the NFL is a star quarterback on a rookie contract. He's not eating the salary cap, and you're so flexible to kind of do things. During that 4-year kind of window, we've seen teams that try to do it, like the Cowboys, Dak Prescott. It didn't work out. They had to pay him. The Rams with Jared Goff didn't work out. He's not with the Detroit Lions. But it worked out with Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson. So teams like that, with a rookie contract, work out. So if you want the window now, a team like the Chargers who haven't won a Super Bowl in a new city in Los Angeles, and you think Julio Jones has got to get you over the hump to throw, possibly Mike Williams. I don't know if Mike Williams could be in the conversation and kind of go to Atlanta, but if Mike Williams is there, Keenan Allen, and you have Julio Jones, you're definitely one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Even without Julio Jones, Gilbert, there's a lot of hype around this Chargers team heading into this season. Based on what they've been able to do, adding to the foundation around Justin Herbert, is the hype warranted?
Yeah, I think so, and I kind of expected it as well, because when you have a star quarterback like Justin Herbert, it just changes your fortunes as a franchise. Philip Rivers is around for the Chargers for a long time, but like in Los Angeles, you want something new, something fresh, a trend, something kind of homegrown, and Justin Herbert is that fit. Being drafted with the Chargers a year ago, number 6 overall, it seemed like we couldn't really tell at SoFi Stadium because there was no fans, so you couldn't tell the atmosphere, but you really get a sense that people are interested in Justin Herbert. So when you have a guy do that well as a rookie, then the expectations are coming. The pressure, the bar is set really high. So I think for the Chargers, you look on the team on paper, yeah, I think it is warranted because you have Joey Bosa and maybe a healthy Derwin James. And we mentioned Keenan Allen and all the players, and they revamped the offensive line as well. So, for me, I've covered this team for a few years now, about 4 years. They seem to kind of get in their way when it comes to like losing one-score games or injuries. So I can't really kind of jump all in to kind of, see this team as a Super Bowl contender. But in terms of a playoff contender and maybe giving the Chiefs a challenge in the division, I definitely see it because you have Justin Herbert and a brand new coach too, and Brandon Staley, who is such a great defensive mind that could really help you out. You got Herbert on offense, and now you got Brandon Staley calling plays on defense.
What do you know about Brandon Staley so far? People obviously just starting to get to know him, and we talk about how high the expectations are. From what you've been able to gather, what kind of guy is he? What kind of coach is he?
Well, he's very outgoing. He's very likable. Sometimes I forget I'm talking to the head coach because he's so personable and very outgoing. It kind of feels like you're chatting with a friend. But when you really hear him talk, when you ask him football questions, like a lot of times NFL head coaches are a little shy to give away the X's and O's and schemes, and not Brandon Staley. Maybe because he's a first-year head coach and he's kind of learning the tricks and stuff like that. But when you ask him a football question, it could be a simple question. He kind of knows what you're asking. He'll help out reporters and just give you a whole scheme, and you kind of feel bad for the people transcribing the quotes from Brandon Staley because it's like a 90-minute press conference, but you really, look at it and you learn a lot from that type of football mind, and you see why he kind of went up from the ranks. I think it was starting at Division II. He was a D coordinator at John Carroll University 4 years ago. Then he became an assistant coach at Chicago, Denver, and out of nowhere, defensive coordinator for the Rams, and now the head coach. So he is moving fast for a reason. Sometimes it's about who you know and networking, but it's not just that with Brandon Staley. It's about being a great football mind. So, again, I don't want to get too ahead of myself because when you're the head coach in the NFL, there's a lot going on, special teams, defense, 2-minute drills, timeouts. Can he do that and call plays on defense at the same time? So I want to see that first. But so far, everything you've seen on the resume and just the way he talks, I think he's a good coach so far.
I wonder what the over-under is on how long he's going to be generous at those press conferences once he gets a real taste of how difficult it is to be a head coach and the expectations that are placed on him. But you're right. You said he's moving fast for a reason, and it seems to be an astronomical ascent when you consider what normally happens in the league and the kind of resumes that normally get those high-profile jobs. Similar sort of question for you, Gilbert, as it relates to Herbert, because, we obviously saw him and what he's capable of. Granted, last season was extremely unusual, but from what you know about him, does he have the intangibles to kind of deal with the pressure, the full crowd, the expectations that are going to be placed on him, especially with some of the weapons that surround him now? And like you said, bringing in a coach that's defensive minded, they have those key cornerstone defensive pieces too. Is he ready for that kind of challenge this upcoming season to take that next step?
Yeah, I keep going back to the rookie year, but I probably shouldn't because every year is different in the NFL, and now fans are coming in. It might be a little different kind of atmosphere, and I know Justin Herbert played a lot of big-time football in Oregon, so maybe fans will be an issue, but there's a new head coach. There's more pressure. Los Angeles is taking notice, so yeah, it could be very different, but going back to the rookie year, everything I saw, I think he could do it. I think he could be the face of a franchise, and I know for him, it's kind of funny because I think maybe he kind of fell in the Chargers' lap at number 6 last year. He was a third quarterback taken because I think it was a personality. He was a little quiet. He was a little shy, reserved. And in the NFL, they want like these rah-rah quarterbacks in the locker room, hyping everybody up. But that's not Justin Herbert. But the thing for him, he's genuine. He likes to be himself. And that's the way he kind of won the locker room. So after that, the rest came easy because I think he has all the talent in the world, strong arm, mobile, accurate, could read defenses, could work on the fly. So in terms of, pressures and expectations, everything I saw a year ago, I definitely think he could do everything in year 2. But, in the NFL, a lot of quarterbacks come and they do well right away. But then defenses watch film and they adjust and the quarterbacks can't adjust again. So that would be the key thing for Justin Herbert. But what I saw from Patrick Mahomes a couple years ago, I kind of see it in Justin Herbert. I know I'm kind of setting the bar too high for him, but I think so far, everything I've seen, he's a very talented player and also a good leader, and he's very smart as well.
Does Justin Herbert have the full support of all the guys in the locker room already?
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. It kind of worked out in a weird way, but in his favor with that week 2 game against the Chiefs, where you got 5 minutes notice to be the starter, and you come in and you play like that, and you have 300 yards passing in your first game, and you almost take the defending champions. I think he took them to the overtime. They should have won that game, but to do all that, and I think he took like a big hit on his first drive too. So he checked all the boxes in one game. So for a rookie, you couldn't ask for a better start. And after that, when you got the talent, and it doesn't matter if you're saying a couple of words, like this is the guy you want to get behind. So, but I've seen a personality come out. He's very outgoing. He's talkative now. I just spoke to him maybe a couple of months ago for the first time in person. He's a lot taller than I thought, but he was outgoing, talkative. So I think after that first year, to get his feet settled, he's going to keep going and get better.
Yeah, growth can be expected. You talk about a moment that changed your life. From the outside, we were all kind of watching that moment when he stepped in unexpectedly, and we were all blown away. And it's hard not to be a fan of his when you see the way that he rose to that occasion. You talk about pressure. It's pretty wild. But just going back to receivers and the news about Julio Jones, you mentioned the fact that they're kind of stacked at that position. When you look at this roster heading into this next season, where do you see the most outstanding needs? And it could be at multiple positions for this team to have the success that a lot of people say they're going to have.
Yeah, the first thing I go to is the defensive line. You have a great start in Joey Bosa. He is one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. But after that, it kind of falls off. He's like a one-man team, and he's done that for a couple of years. I know they have Melvin Ingram for a few years, but Melvin Ingram was hurt last year, and then Joey Bosa had to do everything by himself. He had some concussions too, so he was getting banged up. So you really got to build that defensive line. I know they drafted a few guys in the draft, and Chris Rump the second, but that was a 4th-round pick. You can't expect too much from him right away. Uchenna Uso was a 2nd-round pick a couple of years ago, but he's kind of been inconsistent. But now his year to kind of be an everyday starter, so we'll see how that goes. And I think they're okay maybe in the middle with Linval Joseph and Justin Jones, but they need more pressure. They need more sacks, and it can't just be coming from Joey Bosa. I think for me, that's where I go, and I think that's maybe where the Chargers kind of maybe didn't look enough in the offseason. They did great in the offensive line. They did great in the secondary. They added some wide receivers, a tight end. But for me, I think it's the defensive line. Maybe some more help in for cornerback, because you got Asante Samuel Jr., but he's a rookie and he's going to be a starter. And after that, you don't really have too much behind him. So, this team has a great foundation, some great star players, Pro Bowlers. But I think for me, it's the depth, and I'm kind of probably not remembering more things, but fix special teams. Special teams is a big need. They really addressed that, but a year ago it was a problem. But I think special teams and defensive line are probably the biggest concerns for this team right now.
And it's tough because you're at the mercy of the market too. So when you look at the market for a really, standout corner, like if it doesn't exist, it's kind of like, well, where do we go to pick those pieces up? And, a lot of times it's not necessarily the sexy pick, so to speak, when you're talking about bolstering the trenches. But when you look at Super Bowl production and the teams that make it all the way and they're able to, put pressure on and then also protect their quarterback, it seems like the offensive and defensive lines, I mean, it's football 101, but there should be so much priority there as opposed to like a specialized guy, a receiver, a big name guy like Julio Jones. If you don't have what you need in the middle of the field outside of a key player, like you mentioned, Bosa, then maybe they could be in a lot of trouble and actually fall short of the expectations for people that are saying, oh, this is a Super Bowl sleeper, already. I mean, is that kind of your source of hesitation there, just waiting to see how they navigate some of that stuff before you're ready to say, yeah, this team is actually a Super Bowl contender?
Yeah, that's definitely it. It's a lot of unknown for me as well. And they focus a lot on the offense, and they should have, because offensive line a year ago was a problem. And again, it's 4 out of 5 new starters on the offensive line. We don't know how they're going to play together chemistry-wise. We're just expecting on paper to look good. But yeah, if you don't have your offensive line set, it's not going to work. We saw with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes is great, but it took one game and the offensive line didn't do well, and it kind of fell apart. But I think for the defensive side, I think the Chargers are really banking on Brandon Staley to be a developer, a great play caller. And we saw with the Rams a year ago, a lot of players who were kind of maybe not living to expectations had career years under Brandon Staley when he was a Rams defensive coordinator. So maybe Tom Telesco is seeing that, like, hey, I drafted Jared Tillery in the 1st-round pick. I need somebody to kind of groom him. Brandon Staley could do that. Nazir Adderley, 2nd-round pick. Brandon Staley, do your magic. So Kenneth Murray, again, 1st-round pick. Do your thing. So I think there's talent there, but there's guys that haven't kind of lived up to the potential of their draft pick. And I think maybe Tom Telesco, Dean Spanos, and the Chargers just view Brandon Staley is a great teacher and he could get that job done. So that's the unknown for me. But if I see him doing what he did with the Rams, then maybe it shouldn't be a problem at all for the defensive line and offensive line.
Yeah, it's a really interesting storyline going in. Just curious about your thoughts when you looked at the schedule. I mean, my eyes kind of went to the Cowboys, I think, in week 2. There's a couple other really key matchups for them. When you look at the schedule and what's ahead for them, what stands out to you most?
It's definitely the first 6 weeks before the bye week in week 7. Like you mentioned, the Cowboys, they start in week 1 against the Washington football team. And I mentioned the offensive line, brand new. You got to face Chase Young and Montez Sweat and all those guys emerging in D.C. And they have chemistry. The Chargers don't. So that could be a problem right there. And the Cowboys, and this is going to be a challenge for the Chargers fans in Los Angeles. They are fans out there, but they got to come out and support, because Cowboy fans are going to be there at SoFi Stadium. So that could be a battle in the stands there. And obviously, Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott would be an issue too. But then you go Chiefs, you go Raiders, you go Cleveland, you go Baltimore. Those first 6 weeks are going to be a grind. But I think if the Chargers kind of go at least 3-3, worst case scenario 3-3, they'll be fine. The schedule opens up and they could be probably potentially look like a potential AFC West contender, a playoff team. But if they don't get through that first 6 weeks, it could be a long year for them.
Will fans give them the benefit of the doubt looking at the difficulty at the beginning of the schedule and the fact that you mentioned they have a new head coach and the expectations are really high on him? Or from what you know about the fan base, is it something where like if they drop 4 games out of that 6, all of a sudden people are going to be, beside themselves?
Yeah, it's that latter one. It's going to be a panic. It's going to be a lot of chaos because we mentioned there's high expectations with Justin Herbert and a new coaching staff. It's going to be the first time fans get to see SoFi Stadium. So they're going to be there, dropping boos, and they're not playing up to their potential because this team is talented on paper, and they pretty much are every year, even during the Phillip Rivers years because Keenan Allen was there, Joey Bosa was there, Derwin James was there. So they have the talent. There's always injuries. There's always kind of a special teams blunder. It's always like a bad time I call. It's always something in 2 minutes. I've seen this team so many times where I know close games, they love them, but they don't win them. So if they're struggling, it's going to be the same old kind of year again. So the Chargers come out blazing and doing well. They're not in one-score games. They're winning by 10 points. There's no sweat. I'm not struggling as a beat reporter writing these stories on deadline, and everything's going well for the Chargers, and I think they're legit. But you're right. Those first 6 weeks could be a problem for them.
Who or what was most responsible for the Chargers faltering down the stretch at times last season and just not winning games that on paper, in theory, they needed to win?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I know Anthony Lynn, the head coach of the Chargers last year, got a lot of the heat because he's not around. But the injuries really devastated them. When you have backup players and experienced guys and you're playing these 3-point games in 2 minutes, like this is pressure, and the guys can't do their assignments. But also it is coaching staff. Maybe they have a lead with Justin Herbert, who's doing great, throwing, but they're running the ball on first down often. And it just maybe it could be just bad luck too. Like this team just finds a way. Their kicker, say you want the game-winning field goal and it's easy inside 30 yards. It goes to the left. It just happens with the Chargers. So I think it's a little bit of everything, and it's not just the Anthony Lynn era. It was before that. Phillip Rivers saw a lot of these one-score games. So I think for Justin Herbert and Brandon Staley, they got to change that culture, that this team could win close games and they could live up to the potential, because after a few years, it gets tiring for Charger fans. And why not do it in the first year with fans of SoFi Stadium to kind of change that narrative?
I'm just wondering, Gilbert, if there is a specific player or a group of player, just because you cover the team so closely, that you think that Chargers fans should keep an eye on, either somebody that they might be introduced to or somebody you feel like is poised to do big things that's not necessarily generating a big headline right now.
Yeah, I don't think he goes under the radar, but we forget that Drew Tranquill was hurt all of last year, linebacker for the Chargers. His first year, his rookie year, he was great on special teams. He helped out on special teams. Then he got better as a linebacker, and I think he was one of the best pass coverage linebackers. And that's where Kenneth Murray a year ago was hurt. He had to learn all these pass coverages, and he was more a physical downhill linebacker. But on the flip side, Kenneth Murray got to learn more, and maybe was more versatile this year. But now with Drew Tranquill coming in there, that middle could be a pretty good duo for the Chargers, Drew Tranquill and Kenneth Murray. We kind of forget that. But overall, there's still a lot of unknowns for me. I feel good about Drew Tranquill, but I think just to kind of give you some guys that need to do well is Jerry Tillery, Uchenna Nwosu, Nazir Adderley. I've seen a lot of them, but they're inconsistent. But if those guys, again, with Brandon Staley, do well, that defense could be pretty good. But again, I've seen this team too many times. It kind of like, I know to pump the brakes, but I think Drew Tranquill will make a big difference. And obviously Derwin James, but I keep going down the list of guys that got hurt a year ago. But there's so many guys that got hurt. If they're back and healthy, this team should be good.
Yeah, it's one of those things with injuries that's kind of tough, Gilbert, because it's not like other teams aren't dealing with injuries, right? And I mean, especially with the pandemic, the way that the schedule was condensed, that was one of the things I took away from last season was, man, you see like all these kneecaps and hamstrings and guys aren't getting the run up that they need. They're not, being able to take care of themselves the way that they need. So everybody to a certain extent was a little bit banged up. But when you look at this Chargers team and some of the pieces they were missing, it was really significant. I mean, how significant was some of those problems that they dealt with, and how much do you expect that to not be an issue moving forward?
Yeah, you cannot really predict injuries, but it was a big issue. And I'll start with Derwin James. That player is so important to the Chargers, what they do. I know there's a new defensive coordinator, but I think Derwin James is good with any team. Doesn't matter who's calling the plays because he could defend the best tight end. He could, be a pass rusher. He could be a linebacker, and obviously a safety and a quarterback. So I think if Derwin James is playing defense and he's a positionless player, and Brandon Staley is calling the plays, it could be like, what Jalen Ramsey did for the Rams. He was doing a little bit of everything as well. So, it does really hinder them, especially I think for 2 years in a row for the Chargers. Derwin James got hurt in training camp near the same spot on the field. It was kind of a weird, eerie kind of coincidence for Derwin James. But, if he's healthy, I think this team will be okay. But it does really set you back, especially in close games. And it just happens too many times. Like last year in the offensive line, like Trey Turner, Brian Bulaga, they're supposed to help out this offensive line, which we're talking about this year. That's why I can't really get ahead of myself with offensive line until I see them be healthy. So it happens all the time. But I think if Derwin James is really there, it will help out this team, because this team, I think they're top heavy and they don't have too much depth. And you mentioned it, teams get hurt all the time, but the best ones know how to adjust. And the Chargers haven't really done that. And that could be because they don't have too much depth behind these players. But who knows? Brandon Staley could change all that, and he could really develop these guys.
Yeah, I wonder if that's part of a bigger story too. Is just, when you're top heavy like that and you don't have any depth, all the personnel on the team responsible for keeping these guys healthy, I mean, the onus is on them. And you see so many different players now doing their own thing as it relates to physical therapy, diet, whatever, what have you. But the stakes are so high. The financial game is so big now that I just wonder if that's something that the team needs to take a closer look at under Brandon Staley. But before I let you go, I do just kind of want you to take a look around the league. What storylines are interesting to you, and which teams are you watching that that we might see do something a little bit different than we haven't expected to from last season's production?
Yeah, I guess I'll start kind of with the same old before last year, but I think the Patriots should be much better now with all the money they spent in the offseason, and maybe it could be Cam Newton there, but they also got Mac Jones, so that's very intriguing as well. I'll go back to the AFC West. I'm waiting to see if Aaron Rodgers goes to Denver or he's staying with Green Bay, because if he's in Denver, then that means you got Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and Derek Carr and Justin Herbert, and that would be a very competitive division out there. And obviously, the reigning champs, the Buccaneers, can they do it again? They're kind of one of the rare teams to bring back the entire unit after winning the Super Bowl. And they're trying to run it back. It's so rare in the NFL. It's crazy to think, but they're going to try it. And obviously, the Rams, the local team here with the Chargers, Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff is in Detroit, so that could be an intriguing storyline. But overall, I'm excited about the NFL coming back, and it's going to be, who knows? Maybe the Cowboys are also interesting. People hate them, but they're very interesting. So we'll see. But I think for the Chargers overall, it's going to be a very competitive AFC West with the teams I mentioned, and the Broncos and the Chiefs and the Raiders.
I'm not sure how the Cowboys could get any worse. So hopefully that means that they're going to get better. But I think a lot of people think they're going to be a lot better than they were last season. Just real quick, because you mentioned about Mac Jones and the Patriots. In your mind, if you're calling the shots in New England, do you think Mac Jones should get a shot to start over Cam Newton right out of the gate?
I've always been a big fan of Cam Newton. So I'm gonna stick to that. And I know he struggled a lot a year ago as a passer, but there was a couple games where he came out. And I think it was that game against the Seahawks. Him and Russell Wilson were going at it, and I think maybe the lack of weapons kind of hurt him, or who knows? It could have been also a little bit of him because he was missing a lot of throws. But I think now with so much money they spent to bring in these weapons for Cam Newton, I want to see him get a fair shot. And if he can't hold it down, then yes, obviously bring Mac Jones. But it's always tough to kind of hold back down that rookie first-round pick. I saw it a year ago with Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert, and I kept thinking, I think Tyrod might hold it down for a year. That did not happen at all. So usually these rookies find the way to get on the field.
Yeah, I think Cam Newton knew what Tom Brady was frustrated by, just not having the weapons. So we'll see what he can do with it and having a little bit more time to study the playbook as well. Gilbert, thanks so much for being with us, man. We appreciate the time.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate the time as well.